Welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja, and these are the headlines. The number of coronavirus infections in the United States has crossed 24 million as its death toll nears 400,000. Pakistan has approved the Chinese Sinovac vaccine against COVID-19 for emergency use. The country has registered 1,800 new cases and 58 fatalities, with the death toll crossing 11,000. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.03 million lives and infected over 95.5 million people so far. United States President Donald Trump has restricted the purchase of drones from what he calls adversary countries. Trump signed an executive order which also directed a deeper assessment of the security risks from Chinese-made drones. The move follows Washington's blacklisting of Chinese drone maker DJI and dozens of other companies. Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has urged Russians to stage street protest after court remanded him in pre-trial detention for 30 days. Navalny was remanded for violating the terms of a suspended jail sentence a day after returning to Moscow from Germany. Earlier, the United Nations and Western countries told Moscow to release Navalny immediately. Two United Nations peacekeepers have been killed in an ambush with the rebels in the Central African Republic. The United Nations missions in the country said that the peacekeepers' convoy was attacked near the southern city of Bangassou. The attack comes 2 days after United Nations retook the city from armed groups who had it seized 2 weeks earlier. And in cricket, India are chasing Australia's 328 target to win the final test match and the series at Brisbane. In the second session of the final day, Indian opener Shubman Gill remained top scorer with 91 runs. The four-match test series is currently tied at 1-1. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. The number of coronavirus infections in the United States has crossed 24 million as its death toll nears 400,000. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.03 million lives and infected over 95.5 million people so far. More in this report.
As rising deaths and infections crush hopes of an early end to the pandemic, the WHO has warned the world that weekly deaths from the virus may surge up to 100,000 soon. In the U.S., healthcare workers have declined to take vaccines, creating difficulties for pandemic response by sending wrong message to the public. President-elect Joe Biden announced to keep the travel restrictions for much of Europe and Brazil hours after President Donald Trump lifted the ban. Meanwhile, Brazil has kicked off a nationwide COVID-19 immunization program by distributing China's Sinovac biotech vaccines following emergency use authorization.
Today is another important day for all of us. After many meetings, requests, collections, Brazil has made it. Brazil managed to start its vaccination with this event, which is symbolic, of course, but real, and the practical that initiates the vaccination rollout.
Over in Europe, France's new infections have hit a 6.5-week high, while the number of COVID-19 hospitalizations also rose to highest in a month. Portugal's fragile health system is under growing pressure due to the worst surge in cases and deaths since the pandemic started last year. In the UK, our research has revealed nearly a third of COVID patients discharged from hospitals in England were readmitted within 5 months. But the country is focused on mass inoculation as it gears up for a 24-hour vaccine rollout in London's hospitals.
As you well know, we are prepared to go 24/7. There are movements in supply and making sure that we get the supply into people's arms as fast as possible is absolutely critical. So I wouldn't read too much into an individual day's data. I think the best thing to do is look at the weekly averages, and as you say, you can see that going up and up fast.
In Asia, China reported more than 100 new cases for a 7th straight day in worst domestic outbreak since March last year. Japan has detected the 3 cases of the UK variant of coronavirus in people who had no history of travel to the country.
Now, Pakistan has approved the COVID-19 vaccine manufactured by Chinese state-owned firm Sinopharm. Earlier, Islamabad permitted the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for emergency use. The country's death toll has topped 11,000 as it recorded another 58 fatalities and 1,800 cases overnight. The Health Ministry says currently there are over 35,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. The ministry adds out of over 523,000 countrywide cases, more than 476,000 people have recovered. It says of over 236,000 cases have been detected in the province of Sindh, while the Punjab has reported nearly 150,000 cases so far. In India, the 10th round of talks between the government and the farmer unions has been postponed to the 20th of January. Farmers have been protesting outside the Indian capital against the government's controversial farm laws since the 26th of November. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court appointed the committee that is scheduled to hold its first meeting today to resolve the impasse. In Punjab, Chief Minister Amarinder Singh has slammed the investigation agency's harassment, saying that it will not weaken the farmers' resolve. On Monday, women farmers observed a day of silence and fast burnt on the effigy of the IMF, which has backed the laws. United States President Donald Trump has restricted the purchase of drones from what he calls adversary countries. The White House said that the adversary countries include Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. It said that the unmanned aircraft systems from these countries threatened United States national and economic security. Trump signed an executive order which also directed a deeper assessment of the security risks from Chinese-made drones. It also instructed United States agencies to prioritize removing Chinese drones from American government fleets. The move, which follows Washington's blacklisting of Chinese drone maker DJI and dozens of other companies. Germany says it regrets United States' plans to impose sanctions on a Russian pipe-laying ship. The vessel Fortuna is involved in the construction of Moscow-led Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. The German economy minister said that Washington had informed Berlin of its plans to impose the sanctions. It added Berlin that was taking note of the announcement with regret. Talking to the media, a German government spokesperson said that Berlin's view on the gas pipeline remains unchanged. 2 United Nations peacekeepers have been killed in an ambush with the rebels in the Central African Republic. The United Nations mission to the country says that peacekeepers' convoy was attacked near the southern city of Bangassou. The incident took place 2 days after the United Nations retook control of the city from armed groups who had seized it 2 weeks earlier. Meanwhile, Bangou's top court confirmed President Faustin Archange Touadéra's re-election in December vote. The election was marred with very low electoral turnout as many citizens were unable to cast their votes because of the lack of security. The latest attack blamed on the coalition of armed groups has taken the number of peacekeepers killed in the country to 7 since December. Boko Haram have killed 4 Nigerian soldiers in the country's Difa region. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said that the militants detonated an explosive device near a military vehicle. The Difa region has seen a fresh wave of terrorist activities around recently held municipal elections in the country. Earlier, in another attack on civilians in the same region, 27 people were killed and nearly 1,000 houses were set ablaze. Boko Haram launched a bloody insurgency in 2009 in Nigeria, but later spread its atrocities in neighboring Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. The death toll from ethnic clashes between armed militias has risen to 55 in Sudan's South Darfur state. This comes just a day after another deadly episode of violence in the West Darfur state killed 83. A militia leader said at least 37 others were wounded, while several homes were torched during the attacks. He said that the Rizgat militia carried out the attack to avenge the killing of one of its own members by the rival non-Arab Falatah militia. Rival militias in Sudan signed a peace agreement with Khartoum in October last year to end the hostilities. Following the pact, United Nations African Union peacekeeping mission ended their patrols in the area. In Uganda, opposition leader Bobi Wine says security forces have raided his party's headquarters. This comes hours after he announced challenging President Yoweri Museveni's election victory. Speaking to the media, Bobi Wine said that he has been put under house arrest while party leaders are now on the run. Police said that the National Unity Platform office had been cordoned off for security reasons. On Saturday, the Electoral Commission declared Museveni's a winner with 59% of the vote, but Wine has accused his rival of winning by fraud and called for the end of his house arrest. Japan has accused South Korea of worsening the already strained bilateral ties by reigniting the clash over World War reparations. Speaking in the Japanese parliament, Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi called Seoul's demand of compensation over wartime sex slavery illegal. He termed the recent South Korean court ruling seeking compensation an abnormal development. Motegi urged Seoul to correct international law violation and restore healthy relations. Earlier, Seoul's Central District Court ruled that Tokyo must give $91,360 to each of the 12 victims. The relations between Seoul and Tokyo have plunged to their lowest in decades over the issue. Dozens of organizations from 13 countries have accused France of violating the basic rights of its Muslim minority protected under its legislation. The coalition submitted its findings to the United Nations Human Rights Council, calling for action against France's abuse against Muslims. It said successive governments since 1989 have enraged structural Islamophobia and discrimination against Muslims. The coalition said 2017 anti-terrorism law fueled Islamophobia, targeting Muslim families, individuals, and community centers. France's fragile relationship with its Muslim community has been tested in recent months after President Macron's bid to regulate Islam in the country. Palestine has called on the European Union to send observers to monitor the state's elections scheduled for later this year. Prime Minister Mohammed Sheitata asked the European Union to send international observers mainly in the election process in Israel-annexed East Jerusalem. Sheitata said that Palestine will also ask Israel to allow Palestinians in Jerusalem to participate freely in the elections. President Mahmoud Abbas announced first Palestinian polls in 15 years, with legislative elections for May 22nd and presidential polls for July 31st. Meanwhile, European Union welcomed the election call and urged Israel to facilitate the electoral process throughout the Palestinian territory. Egypt and Jordan have agreed to push ahead with efforts to revive negotiations for the Palestinian issue. Jordan's King Abdullah and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi discussed this during a meeting in Amman. The Jordanian state media said that the two leaders discussed ways to strengthen bilateral ties and the latest regional developments. The two sides agreed to push forward consultations to revive the Palestinian-Israel peace process. The Egyptian president said that Cairo will continue its efforts in this issue, while King Abdullah lauded Egypt's efforts for the Palestinian cause and to stabilize the situation in the Gaza Strip. El-Sisi is on an official visit to Jordan following an invitation from the king. 7 United Nations member countries have lost their right to vote in the General Assembly because of unpaid dues. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres made the announcement in a letter to the President of the General Assembly. The countries include Iran, Niger, Libya, Congo, Brazzaville, and South Sudan, along with Zimbabwe and the Central African Republic. The letter also mentions the amount each country can pay to recover their right to vote. The United Nations Charter calls for a voting rights suspension if their contribution to the body is delayed by 2 years. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tens of thousands of people continue to flee Indonesia's South Kalimantan province after 10 days of torrential rainfall. At least 15 people have been killed in floods that affected over 10 cities of the province. The National Disaster Mitigation Agency says over 39,000 people have been evacuated so far. Indonesia's President Joko Widodo has termed the worst flooding in half a century. The country's meteorology agency has warned of the risk of extreme weather and other flood dangers in the coming weeks. In Israel blockade Gaza, a man with unswerving determination takes up the fight with his disabilities through karate. Despite the odds and non-availability of proper facilities, Yusuf Abu Amira has learned the skills to fight with sticks. More about his bravery in this report.
Yusuf Abu Amira, a Palestinian law school graduate, never let his disabilities hold him back. Born without legs and with only partially developed arms, he has taken up a new challenge, karate. The 24-year-old orange belt shows his stick fighting skills as he trains with his coach at Gaza's Al-Mashtal Club for martial arts.
As people with disability, or what we are referred to as people from a marginalized category, I want to play karate so I can defend myself, and I dream of taking part in international championships and the Olympics.
His mastery of the stick helps him make up for his missing limbs. He has also learned how to deliver strong punches and fend off attacks with his body and arms. Coach Hassan Al-Rai says his pupils showed particular determination.
I was surprised that Yusuf has different skills and can do things better than people with fewer disabilities could do. He is determined and defiant, and he challenges his reality. He wants to show society that he is not disabled. Society is disabling him by putting barriers in front of him so that he cannot reach his dream.
A resident of Gaza's beach refugee camp, Abu Amira, travels along city street in a motorized mobility scooter. He graduated from the Islamic University of Gaza's College of Sharia and Law last year.
The International Monetary Fund says it is working with Sudan to build the preconditions for broad debt relief. The IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgievna said that this during a news conference. Georgievna hailed the strong support from the United States and Britain for providing debt relief to Sudan. She said that the relief is being provided under the heavily indebted Poor Countries Initiative. This follows Washington's removal of the country from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Earlier, IMF Mission Chief for Sudan said that the removal of Khartoum from the list has eliminated one of the hurdles towards debt forgiveness. Most shares in the Asia-Pacific has risen as COVID-19 vaccination gained momentum in the region and across the world. South Korea's Kospi led gains among major regional markets as it jumped over 2.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index also gained over 2%. Australia's ASX 200 and Japan's Nikkei 225 had added over 1%. But mainland Chinese shares are trading lower, with both the Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen Component shedding over 1%. It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.